الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد. My dear respected brothers, sisters, and elders, there is a shift today against religious fundamentalism and towards secularism. And for whatever reason, it has been accepted that the most beneficial and efficient system of government, and on a smaller scale, system of living your life is the secular system. And that we should adopt only the secular system. We should adopt only those things that make sense to us. And if something doesn't make sense to us, we should never apply that, no matter who it is who is saying it. And it's far from our belief that if something doesn't make sense to us now, it might make sense to us in the future. So the standard for what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong has become our intellect, has become secularism. But is intellect really that great of a standard? Can the brothers please come forward, make room in the back? Is intellect really that great of a standard? Can intellect be used to govern morality or how we should live our lives? So to understand it, secularism, it's based on two things: our five senses and then our intellect. Our observation and then our intellect. I see something that looks like a fan, I say this is a fan. I see something that looks like a pipe, I say this is a pipe. I see something that looks like a bed, I say this is a bed. That's it. That's the extent of our intellect. We can see something and then we can reach a conclusion based on experience, based on what we've seen and heard and felt before. We can reach a conclusion based on our senses. That's all intellect can do. And it's not the case that if something is prevalent today, everyone accepts something to be morally right today, everyone accepts something to be the right way to do something today. That does not mean that that is what the sentiment will be tomorrow. Historically, if you look at it, there were many examples of things that were considered very moral or considered justified at the time. But later on, no one considers them justified. To give a few examples, Adolf Hitler in his mind has justified his horrendous act, and he laid it out in the final solution. Benito Mussolini, influenced by Hitler, in his mind he was also justified in the horrendous acts that he did on a state level. And who today from Italy or who today from Germany will say that these acts were justified? Who today will say, yes, what they did I agree with? There's very, very, very few people that will say that. And more recently, in the realm of physics, the popular theory in physics was we're all living in this medium called ether. And everything that all light traverses through ether. And there's no such thing as air, it's all ether. And then in the early 1900s, Einstein came out and he disproved this theory with the special theory of relativism. These are just examples that serve to prove that just because something is prevalent, something is considered the right way in society at one point in time, that does not mean that that is in fact the right thing to do. That does not mean that society's perceptions will not change. And this is where religious fundamentalism comes in. This is where Quran and Hadith comes in. This is where the Prophet's divine message and Allah's divine revelation comes in. Because secularism, intellect, is based on observation and senses, observation and intellect. However, the Islamic system, it's based on three things. Yes, you have intellect. Yes, you have the senses, but the third and most important thing is divine revelation. The Quran and the Hadith guide us in a way that the senses and the intellect can simply not guide us. And that is the only difference between Muslim and non-Muslim thinkers, Muslim and non-Muslim philosophers, Muslim and non-Muslim scientists. Muslim thinkers, they use the Quran and Hadith to guide them. And non-Muslim thinkers, they had no base to start with. They had nothing to start with, and they had to look at the world around them, what they observed, and they came to conclusions through that. So intellect, it's useful if you have the Quran and Hadith. That's why Ibn Khaldun, in Muqaddam Ibn Khaldun, he writes, intellect is like a scale. You can use this scale to measure gold, to weigh how much it weighs, but if you don't have any gold, the scale is useless. So he says intellect is the exact same way. If you have the Quran and Hadith to guide you, it's a very useful thing. But if you don't have the Quran and Hadith, it's completely useless. Imam Jalaluddin Rumi, rahmatullah alayh, in Mathnawi, in the third part of his book, he mentions a story that he said in India there was someone brought an elephant. And an elephant was an animal that was alien to India. No one had ever seen an elephant in India before. And they put it in a dark room. And it was extremely dark. When you go in, you can't see anything. So they sent in one guy. They said, go figure out what this thing is. So he went in and he felt the ears of the elephant. And he said, oh, this is a fan. They sent the second guy in. He said, you go figure out what's inside. So he went in and he felt the trunk of the elephant. And he said, oh, this is some sort of big pipe. Then they sent a third person in. And they said, you go inside and try to figure out what's inside. And he felt the 4 legs of the elephant. And he said, oh, this is, a bed or a throne or something, or a chair or something like that. It has 4 legs. And so they were all looking at the same thing, but because it was dark, they all came to different conclusions. And then the final line, Imam Jalaluddin Rumi, rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions, Dar kafe har kas agar shama dari, ikhtilaf az guftashan berun shudi. If these people had just a small candle in their hands, they would have all reached the same conclusion. In other words, Imam Jalaluddin Rumi, rahmatullah, what he was trying to say is, if you have the light of Iman in your heart, your intellect will lead you to the same, everyone's intellect will lead them to the same conclusion about the divine creator, about the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about the divine wisdom behind all of his actions, if you have the light of Iman in your heart. So that's what Imam Rumi was trying to say, that if you have this light in your heart, you will not be misguided. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sums it up perfectly in the ayah of Surah An'am. He says, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُذِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you follow the majority of the people that are on the earth, what will happen? يُذِلُّوكَ. They will misguide you from the path of Allah. And then he says, إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. All they're doing is following their intellect. Whatever logic leads them to believe, that is what they are following. وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُسُونَ. All they are doing is khars. They're shooting in the dark. If it sticks, it sticks. If they're right, they're right. That is why if you read non-Muslim thinkers, non-Muslim philosophers, some of them say things that are completely what would be considered abnormal today. But some of them, they got pretty close to what Islam says, because they were just shooting in the dark. If it sticks, it sticks. If they're right, they're right. If not, oh well. That's why the light of Islam, and then on the other side, if you look at the Muslim philosophers, the Muslim thinkers, the Muslim scholars, they were guided. They said, look, the Quran says this, the Hadith says this. That's why this is our belief. They used the Quran and Hadith as a base, and then they came to their conclusions. So we make dua to Allah that Allah illuminates all of our hearts with this light of Iman, and Allah illuminates the hearts and souls of every Muslim with the light of Iman. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa, amma ba'd. The ayah that I meant, that has been recited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Inna fi khalq as-samawati wal ard. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and of the skies and the earth, wa ikhtilaf al-layli wan nahar, and in the days and nights becoming longer and shorter. لَآيَاتٍ, there are proofs of evidence. لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, for those people who have intellect. Allah is saying that you should reflect. You see the skies and the earth, and you realize that there's no way that this just happened. And there's no way that any of this could be possible without a divine creator. That's why the Arabs used to say, Al-ba'ratu tadullu ala al-ba'ir. Animal droppings, when you see them, it implies that an animal passed by here. Wal-athru yadullu ala al-masir. And when you see footprints, it implies that someone had just walked past here. And then they say, Laylun dajin wa naharun sajin wa sama'un dhatu abrajin. Light that is gloomy, day that is tranquil, and then the sky that is full of stars. أَفَلَا تَدُلُّ عَلَى الصَّانِعِ الْخَبِيرِ. Do all of these things not imply that there is a divine creator, that there is someone who made all of this, that all of this just did not happen by itself? Do all of these things not point to that? So we should reflect. And this is, in Arabic it's called muraqaba or tafakkur, just sitting down and reflecting. And we should all do this 10 minutes, 20 minutes, if not 5 minutes of the day. You sit down, you do nothing, and you just close your eyes, and you think about all the displays of Allah's power. You think about all of the things that Allah has done to make our life possible today. And if you don't have enough time that you can't sit down for 5 minutes, then when you're driving home, just instead of listening to the radio, just think about all the displays of Allah's power. The car you're driving, the phone you have, the road that you're driving on. These are all displays of Allah's power. And these are all displays of Allah's mercy. And if even that is not possible, then before you go to sleep, when you're laying in your bed, just think about these things and fall asleep. That's why the ayah that was mentioned, it says those people who reflect, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ, they remember Allah, they reflect on Allah's power, قِيَامًا, standing, وَقُعُودًا, and they're sitting, وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ, and they're laying on their sides. In other words, they're laying down, getting ready to sleep. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, and they reflect and think about the creation of the skies and the earth. And that leads them to say, رَبَّنَا, O our Lord, مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. There is no way that you have created all of these in vain. There is no way you have created all of these without a purpose. Subhanak, all of these accusations against you that people say that you have created these in vain or these were created by themselves. Subhanak, Ya Allah, you are pure from such accusations. Such accusations should not be made against you. فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and Allah save us from the hellfire. So a small amount of time in our day, we should try to just sit and do nothing but reflect. Think about Allah's power. Think about Allah's mercy. Think about the way Allah, His divine system works in this world. And if you do that, what will be the result? It will strengthen your iman, and it will lead to taqwa. Taqwa simply means, in a very broad definition, being conscious of Allah. You are always remembering that whatever I am doing, Allah is there, Allah knows. And everything I do, I will be asked about on the Day of Judgment. That's what muraqabah or tafakkur or reflecting or meditation, all of these things will lead to. That's why in the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet Muhammad in the form of a human being, and he asked him some questions. And he asked them so the Sahaba sitting next to the Prophet they could hear the answers. And so one of the things he asked him was, Mal ihsan. قال يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما الإحسان? What is ihsan? Prophet Muhammad replied, الإحسان أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. This is a hadith of Bukhari. Prophet Muhammad said, ihsan is that when you're worshipping Allah, it is as if you are seeing Allah, and then you worship. And if you can't reach this level of spirituality, this level of taqwa, then at least the lower level, فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, at least have this realization in your heart that Allah is watching you. And if you have that realization in your heart, where whenever you look at anything, you look at your phone, you look at your clothes, you look at whatever you look at, and it reminds you of Allah, it will prevent you from doing sin. Whenever you are about to commit a sin, you will think twice. You will think twice before lying on your tax form to get a higher return. You will think twice before unnecessarily accusing someone else. You will think twice before unnecessarily fighting with someone. You will think twice before committing any action. Why? because either you know that Allah is seeing you, or even better than that, you can see Allah when you're doing whatever action. And the hadith mentions that أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهِ, that you worship Allah as if you are seeing Him. The word ibadah is very broad. It doesn't simply mean that you're worshiping Allah. It doesn't mean that it doesn't include only prayers or fasting or zakah or hajj. The word ibadah is very broad. You go home and you look at your husband or wife, or you look at your kids with love. That's a form of ibadah. You open the door, you hold the door open for someone. That's a form of ibadah. You help your neighbor out with someone, Muslim or non-Muslim. That's a form of ibadah. So every single action that you're doing, it should be as if you are seeing Allah and you know that He is watching you. And if you can't see Allah, the lower level is that you at least realize that Allah is watching you. This realization is the bare minimum in every action of our life, that we should know that Allah is watching us in every action we do. And the second benefit of muraqabah, tafakkur, is it leads to us understanding why Allah made us do all of these things. Why is Allah making us pray 5 times a day? If a person just sits down and thinks about it, why? Why 5? Why not 4? Why not 6? Why not 8? Just sit down and think about it. Or why do I have to recite longer in Fajr and Dhuhr and very less in Maghrib? Why do I have to do that? This is just a few examples. For anything that we do in religion, anything Allah has commanded us to do, think about what is Allah's wisdom behind this. And that will open doors for you. It will become, once you realize Allah's wisdom, it will make worshiping Allah easier. It will make listening to Allah's commandments easier. And Muslim philosophers have written books on this. They call this ilmu asrar-id-din, the knowledge of the secrets behind the wisdom of Allah, behind the wisdom behind deen. Imam Ghazali in Ihya al-Ulum, he sets out to try to solve and try to figure out what some of these wisdoms are. And more recently, Shah Waliullah Muhaddith Dehlwi, in his book Hujjatullah al-Baligha, that book is the best book written in this field. Shah Waliullah rahmatullah alayhi, he goes through as many of the acts of worship that we do, and he tries to tell you, look at the divine wisdom of Allah behind why we have to pray this many times. Why should we fast only 1/12 of the year? Why should we do this? Why should we do that? He goes through all of this. And this is all a result only of him doing muraqabah. Him sitting down, closing his eyes and thinking, look at Allah's power. Look at, he told me to pray. What's the wisdom behind it? And he figured it out. He studied the hadith, he studied the Quran, and he said, look, this hadith tells us that the wisdom behind praying is this. The wisdom behind praying is, he mentions that there's a hadith, as-salatu mu'iddatul lirru'ya. When we pray, we are conditioning our eyes, because to see Allah on the Day of Judgment, to see this divine being, to see this being who is the creator of everything, our eyes cannot handle it. That's why a small drop of Allah's tajalli fell on the mountain and Musa alayhi salam fainted. And so Shah Waliullah, he says, when we pray, we are conditioning our eyes to see Allah on the Day of Judgment. And he said that because of the hadith, as-salatu mu'iddatul lirru'ya. This is just one example of thousands, if not tens of thousands of examples that he mentioned, and other philosophers and other Islamic scholars have mentioned on why we do what we do, why Allah has commanded us to do what we do. And so we make dua to Allah that Allah gives us all the ability and He enables us to do muraqabah and tafakkur, and He envelops our hearts and our souls and our bodies in the light of Islam. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم عباد الله يرحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون واذكروا الله يذكركم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأجل